Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another edition of Ham Talk. I know you guys have just been holding your breath waiting for the next show, and here we are. Look, a little change of scenery for me. Greg's shack is looking amazing. Miss Melissa, cute as always. We've got JD, and I think Andrea said she's in New Jersey shooting this month. Is that right, Andrea?
That is correct.
Yeah. All right. So quick introduction for anybody who's just joining us for the first time. Our sponsors are the Hamsters Weak Signal Group. So a huge thank you to them. Without them, this show wouldn't be possible. And I'm Sam, KE0LMY. This is Miss Melissa.
Hi, KI5ICQ.
This is Miss Andrea.
Hello, Andrea, K2EZ.
Mr. JD.
JDW1DVZ.
And of course, the Greg, the one who has to talk all the time. Go ahead, Greg. Introduce yourself.
Greg, N5XO. Extraordinary.
You know, have Greg a hard time because that's what half of you guys come to watch the video for, is us giving Greg a hard time. You know it's true. Okay, so
that probably is correct.
Can I just say something real quick?
Sure.
No, when we call this the weak signal group, that does not mean that the signals are weak. In fact, there's a lot of RF power that goes out to make these communications happen. Greg, is that right?
Yeah.
A
lot of people compare weak signal with QRP.
Right.
It's not QRP.
Yeah,
in fact,
observation.
on 2 meters, on 6 meters, 2 meters, and 220, I run full legal limit, and 432, 1,000, and 900 and 1296, I'm on 500. So it's not low power.
So the weak signal is not low power. It is a small signal that many times is enhanced through either antenna design or preamplifiers at the antenna, right?
Signal to noise ratio.
Okay.
And if you guys are interested in more information about the group, I believe they have a group on Facebook. So we'll get Miss Melissa to drop a link to that. And then Greg can get into a whole conversation with you about that. So Melissa, if you will drop that link into the description, appreciate it. Okay, so as I was saying, we have a jam-packed show this month. We are so excited. I'm not, because once again, I am teaching emergency communications, so that's just going to be a long thing that Greg is thankfully going to bust into 2 or 3 segments. Otherwise, you guys would be sitting here for over an hour just for the training class, and I'm sure you don't want to do that. So we have some really entertaining segments. I believe Miss Raisa is back with a cute little take on a commercial, only she's turned it a little bit towards ham radio. So it's going to be pretty cute. You guys are going to like that. So you'll get to see that here in a little bit. And then Melissa's got some comments and questions we're going to roll into. We'll take care of those coming up real shortly. And then my segment, of course, is on emergency communications training. Again, that'll probably be busted into the next 3 months. So stay tuned for that. And then Greg is actually going to tackle beacons this month. So if you wanted a show that was really going to be slammed, you're getting it this month. I don't know how the rest of you are faring in the extremely cold weather, but I'm in Missouri. We had 1 degree today with a wind chill factor of -4 or 5, and we're expecting -30 over the next week. So I hope all of you are staying warm out there in our viewership land. And if you're not, you know what? Drop Greg a comment right down below. Just go ahead and let him know what you think about us going through all of this during this cold time.
I'm thinking that's inhumane weather.
I'm thinking it's global warming run amok.
Your video is frozen, JD.
It's frozen?
Yeah. There you go.
Doesn't seem to be.
Now it's working.
It must be too cold.
It's 20 degrees with a wind chill of 7 here, and I refuse to open my front door.
Right.
I outside and turn my truck on. As a matter of fact, I might have to run outside and turn my truck off just to get it to start because it's getting a little boggy now. So let's go to Miss Melissa with the comments. And I think you said you had a question this month.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments and a question.
All right, and I'll be right back. So you go for it, Miss Melissa.
Okay. Robert, WA4RXK, states, first off, before my question, I want to make a few comments on the show. I love the show, especially the way you all interact with each other, and you do not take yourselves seriously. You're informative and humorous, and it's a great combination. I've been a ham for 50 plus years, and I've never had any interest in VHF or higher. The hamsters and this show have lit a fire of interest. That said, I love the show balance. Greg and Andrea are very informative, and Melissa and Sam are just absolutely adorable. I'm really looking forward to seeing JD's segments in the future.
I like this guy.
So the question is, how did all of you get your start on VHF operation? And since after years of Greg's opinion on weak signal and simplex, I would like to hear from Andrea on how she would recommend I get started on VHF weak signal and what equipment.
Well, that's a good question. You got to excuse me. I'm a little hoarse today. Coming out for having a cold. I guess that makes me a pony, huh? So how did I get into weak signal? Well, I've been a ham 44 years now, and I 2-meter repeaters. Actually, when I got licensed, it was Morse code HF, and then 2-meter repeaters, and I was only a teenager, and I heard a little bit about weak signal. I got interested in satellites, which is why I had gotten a sideband VHF UHF radio. Never got the antenna up, and then I was going on a road trip in 2015, and I heard there was a VHF contest, and I knew I had equipment that would do sideband, and most of the activity was on sideband. That's one thing a lot of people don't get is they may or may not know a VHF contest is going on because their FM only radio won't pick up the sideband. And so it's kind of like unlike an HF contest people can't miss, it's kind of silent with most of the equipment not being able to pick it up. But anyway, I put this in the car. I was going to be on the road. I looked up the rules and I discovered there was this rover category for mobiles. I'm like, I've got 4 bands. I fit this limited rover category perfectly. And I decided, okay, I'm going to give out some points. And the bug bit me. I enjoyed it so much. People were interested in me as a rover because I was changing grids. I can work them again anytime I changed the grid. And I had started in Pennsylvania. And since I was on a road trip, I had a mission. I was going up to Minnesota first to visit some friends. And I did that whole drive. And then after visiting with them, I continued the contest. I had a great time, and I thought, I've got to do something better. I need a better antenna on the car. And that led me down to the crazy path that I have now with my mobile. And so that's how I got into it. That doesn't answer how you might get into it. And that's all depends upon, where you live and like where I live in a valley, I can do a surprising amount actually from my car and my driveway, but it puts me at a disadvantage. So operating it from the mobile just made a lot more sense for me. And so I'll leave it there and turn it over to Greg for his comments.
Well, one of the things that I'm going to add to what you just said, on single sideband 2 meters, Andrea and I have worked each other when she's down in Brenham, Texas, where she works most of the time. we're what, 268 miles, I think.
I don't recall the number.
It's 100 and maybe it's 106. Anyway, it's over 175 miles. Her and I have never had a problem working each other. From her mobile to my station. So, you know, you can really increase the distance. JD and I, now I know he's 268 miles up in up there by Fort Worth, and we've had a few little quirks on our communications, and it's been really rough copy sometimes. But as a rule, we don't have a problem picking up the mic and working each other. And if we could get Sam on there, I actually worked a station, and I'll find a call sign because I worked the guy that actually knows you in your town about 7 months ago. So, you know, you can have a lot of fun. I got started kind of by accident. I bought a new radio for the first time in like God, almost 40 years. I was still running my
No, no.
I know it's I stuck with the same radio from 1969 until 2006. And then my wife made the mistake of saying, you can go get a new radio. And I bought a Kenwood TS2000. I discovered 6 meters because of that radio. Had so much fun on there. I took part on the VHF, UHF contest, but only on 6 meters. And I worked N0 IRS in Kansas City on 6. He goes, "You got any other bands?" And I said, "Well, I got 2, but you know, I have a vertical set of stacked beams." And he goes, "Well, that'll work because we're far enough apart." So I worked him and 10 other stations in Kansas on 2 meters, and I'm like, "Holy cow, this is fun!" And behind me, you see the results of that.
Oh my God.
Well, Melissa, was this gentleman's name Edward? Is that right?
Uh,
Say again?
Well, what was the gentleman's name that had the question?
It
Oh.
is Robert.
What was it?
Robert.
Oh, Robert. Okay, thanks. So, Robert, it's also kind of fun to be able to do what the physics say you're not supposed to be able to do, which is something beyond line of sight communications for VHF and UHF communications, because you're not supposed to be able to do that. And yet it works if you have the right equipment. And I guess the best example of that is like tropospheric ducting, which can be thousands of miles on VHF. Has anybody ever done that in this group?
Yeah.
By accident.
My best DX on 2 meters. I've gone from Pennsylvania to Sam's area out in Missouri. I've also worked from Brenham, Texas to Miami, Florida, and up into Michigan on 2. The Florida, I've worked a number of times, not just 2, but 220 megahertz and 432 megahertz. All 3 of those bands. I know people who've worked it up into the microwaves. And this is from my car. Admittedly, I've got 6-foot Yagis on those 3 bands on my car. So, but it's only 12, 10, and 8 feet off the ground.
The car that's never seen an automatic car wash.
Not in a long time.
Hey,
So
the way she
that's
gets
one
her
that
car cleaned is she goes ahead and runs over deer, and then they replace parts with clean parts.
I think there's a story there.
Yeah.
Any
There was.
story.
Well, that's one of the
my,
reasons it's fun is it's hard. It's kind of hard and not supposed to happen, and yet it works. So that's kind of, I mean, to Robert's question, I think it's interesting because you can make it happen with the right equipment.
Agreed. My biggest DX from here in San Antonio, I worked station in Ontario. I've worked Michigan on 2 meters, Ohio. I came close. I could hear the guy in New York, but he could never hear me. And I've worked Florida on all bands from 6 through 1296.
Was that tropospheric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, the 1296 contact was with 10 watts and a 45 element loop Yagi. And Ruth hated that contact because it was at
You woke her
4:30
up at an odd hour of the day.
Yep, it was 4:30 in the morning. I went dancing like a giddy schoolgirl into the bedroom to tell her all about this contact. She wasn't as impressed as I was.
No comment. So maybe a few seconds on what tropospheric ducting is, just to provide a little educational segment on what that phenomenon allows. Greg, would you like to do that, or Andrea?
I'll let Andrea do it since I keep babbling and I've got a segment and she doesn't.
Okay. Well, back in one of the early episodes, and I can't remember which one, I did a segment on tropospheric propagation. And I want to emphasize it's not all ducting. And some people, talk about ducting as necessary for this, but ducting, the signal gets trapped between thermal layers of the atmosphere. The upper layer refracts it down, the lower layer refracts it up, and it will go a long distance and drop out. Normal tropospheric propagation has to do with the scattering and refraction, again, from thermal layers. It's typically involved, but that can still go fairly long distances. It gets quite involved when you start getting into the scatter aspect of it. But in general, you should be able to get upwards of about 200 miles with fairly moderate beams.
Are you still wearing it?
There's a station. I'm from where I am in New Jersey. There's a station in Maryland. I can work him reliably on 2 meters, 1 1/4, 70 centimeters, 902, 1296, pretty much any day from just the hill behind my house. It's a few hundred feet higher than me. But I can work them down at lake level, lower than me, as long as I get to the far side of the lake. So I'm not like shooting straight into the hill. And he, 180 miles, I can work that quite reliably on those bands. Some of those we go to CW for. But when you get enhancement, that will stretch out, signals will get better. And then when you get ducting, it can be really far. But I've worked long non-duct conditions, like that one to Missouri. I want to say the signal was like an S1. It was so far in the dirt, but because it was absolutely quiet on the band, at 100% copy on that person in Missouri from Pennsylvania. It was awesome. And so anyway,
there you go, Robert. There's a good question, and one of the reasons why VHF UHF is kind of fascinating, a part of the spectrum.
Another way of kind of thinking about it, because it also ebbs and flows. I always kind of liken like 2 meters and up to a rubber band. I mean, it's going in and out, and it can actually retract your range as well on that. And then with the ducting, we always kind of refer to it, kind of our Star Trek-y nerd dorky thing, as wormholes, and for our radio signals. So our radio signals are taking a wormhole, and sometimes you have no idea where it's going to pop out. So it's kind of fun.
Can I ask an unasked question that Robert may have asked, but he didn't? And why is 10 watts a lot of power on 1296?
You've got a lot of antenna gain.
Yeah,
it's all about gain.
Yeah, your antennas have got massive amounts of gain. I mean, my 10 watts, by the time it comes out, ERP is almost 14,000 watts.
There you go. That's a great response, Greg. And I think it kind of clears up. But another side of that answer might be it's difficult to generate RF power on 23 centimeters. Would that be accurate also?
I actually, on 23 centimeters here, Now, at the time I made my initial contacts to Florida and stuff, I only had 10-watt capability in an old Yaesu 736R.
Don't you have a Gemini amp now that'll do more
Yeah.
than that?
Yeah, I've got, I can do 280 watts on 1296 now, and I've got a tube amp that it's a homebrew that I've been building, and put that in service. That'll actually give me right at 900 watts on 1296. I plan on using that up at the ranch with, I've got a 26-foot dish that's going to go for EME operating.
Are you using coax, or what are you using for that? Waveguides?
Well, it's waveguide going out to the thing, but I've actually got the way the dish is positioned and everything, I'm only talking like 5 feet of feed line.
Because of losses.
Yeah. And we're able to go straight out on that. It's actually not waveguide. It's 2 1/4 inch hardline with DIN connectors, and then but it's 5-foot run coming out of the wall of the shack into the dish with a clear sight to the moon.
I just thought it was a great question. I'll shut up now and let Melissa go to the next one. But I just thought that needed a little additional unpacking.
Andrea, were you going to say something, Andrea?
I was just going to say, power is still always good, and at 1296 you can still get some power, but certainly the antenna gain offsets that a whole lot. And when you get to 2304 megahertz or 3.4 gigahertz or 5.7, like 10 gigahertz, the ability to get power is really restricted. But on 10 gigahertz, I have a 2-foot dish with 3 watts, and it comes out to like over 7 kilowatts ERP. And that's about, there's some people that run more power than that. Some people run bigger dishes, but most, like at least competitive contesters, have a very similar setup to what I have. And so antennas help.
It would be accurate to say, like in most things in ham radio, it all starts at the antenna and the feed line, with the hardware being second to that. Would that be accurate?
Yes, sir. Just to give you an idea, on 10 gigahertz, an EME station with, say, a 10-foot dish, 50 watts, because you've got so much gain coming off of the dish and everything, is quite possible. On 1296, I've made 2 EME contacts running 300 watts, but I've also got almost 32 dB gain off of that one antenna setup. So, that's a big multiplier.
For those studying for the exam, maybe one sentence or two on what ERP means.
Effective radiated power.
And that's calculated
by your input power, your losses, and your gain.
Yep.
On the antenna. And they make for calculator handicap people, they make a cool little chart, and it shows based on 100 watts, this is your output at this dB gain, and goes all the way down.
All right, Melissa, do you have another comment or question for us?
No.
Now that we beat the Robert question to death, she's given up.
Way over time on that one.
Oh, Robert appreciated it. Right, Robert?
I think it was a great conversation starter.
It was definitely. Now, Greg knows a little bit about the commercial type thing that Raisa shot for us. So Greg, why don't you give us a little bit of information about Raisa's segment that she sent you for this month?
Raisa made a cute little video. Some of you guys have probably seen the Porsche commercial where, you know, the glamorous model is sitting in the car and she's rubbing her hand around the Porsche and constantly saying Porsche or Ferrari or whatever it happens to be that she's on. Well, let's just watch Raisa's version of that commercial.
Porsche Amateur Radio. Porsche Amateur Radio. Porsche Ham Radio. Is this frequency in use? CQ 20 meters. This is Radio 1 Bravo India Golf.
So
Apparently, I have help.
you have help, and you don't have Fred. And then, yes, I'm going to beat that dinosaur into the ground. So you better not forget to bring Fred back. I don't care if it's this show or the next show, but Fred comes back.
Okay. Say hi, Odie. Goodbye, Odie.
Greg likes to show off his nice wall of radios, but for those of us,
do you know why Greg didn't get anything for Christmas that's ham radio related?
uh-oh.
Because there's nothing he doesn't have already.
Hey, I would have also gone with the he earned coal part. I bet if Ruth were there with him, she would second me on that.
Greg, you really need to put a ring around that dog's eye.
He does kind of like the target dog.
No, Petey.
Or Petey, yeah, there you go.
All right. Could you leave?
That's our comic relief for this month. You guys
All
love
right.
it.
Why don't we just roll into your segment?
Please.
So part of what I do for my community emergency response team and my amateur radio emergency services in Camden County is we do an emergency communications training, and it's really kind of a hybrid training to teach people how to actually talk on the radio and what they need to say in emergency situations, because my certs and the first responders that I work with on a regular basis are on the radios almost daily. So my segment is teaching them all of the things that you need to watch out for, like eating your mic or your sibilants, anything like that, anything that's going to disrupt the signal going all the way over to wherever we're trying to receive it. Part of the thing that we overhauled for this year's training was the script that we use. So we put together scripts so that our people can actually practice talking to each other on the radio and hopefully get over any mic fright that they might be experiencing. Because I know no matter how long you've been doing amateur radio, or if you talk on radios every single day, at some point you freeze up, you get that mic fright, and you just can't get past it. So what we found is if we actually put the radios in our CERT volunteers' hands and say, no, you actually need to speak through the radio so that we can see how you sound. If you put your sentences together before you start your transmission and you're taking up less time and space on the airwaves, then you're going to be communicating effectively during an emergency. Because anybody who has had to communicate with first responders during an emergency, they want the information fast. They want it without any filler words, any of those filler words that you tend to have slip in when people are talking faster than they're thinking. And they want the information in a way that they can easily digest it. So if we're using the same speech and the same kind of common language that they're using when we go into the training for our volunteers, it helps tremendously and it makes it a little more seamless on that communication. So Greg will have, like I said, my segment busted up over the next 2 or 3 months so that you get a little bit of it each time, because altogether it's about an 1.5 to 2 hour long class, depending on the questions that we get from the audience. So here's the first part. Right over on the right hand side of the screen. That's home right there. All right, so we'll do the basic stuff. Now, our Camden County CERT uses the Bofang GT3TPs. In case you guys haven't seen those, this is what they look like. I chose one that has a rubber duck antenna, which is the original antenna that comes with the radio, because it's a lot smaller. Oh, this one actually extends. Hey, I changed my mind. Actually, we have our extending antenna. You can actually get antennas that do a number of things depending on what you need them to do. So we'll touch a little bit on that. This one, of course, extends. I love these antennas the best because when they're down, there's less chance that they're going to be broken. And when they're up, they extend, of course, the range that you can use the radio at. Any input on that there, Jasper?
Depending on where you're operating, some antennas might work better than others. For instance, you won't need as long of an antenna if you're on flat ground, but because we are in an area with a lot of rocks and the like, we have to get some distance with our antenna. And sometimes the height of the antenna gets a little ridiculous for handhelds.
Yeah, we have a couple of the extendable antennas that are, I think, about 4 feet long to go on this handheld.
They are goofy to look at.
So we'll go over some simple parts. You always have the power knob and volume control, which you can turn on here. You have the transmit button, which on this radio is on this side.
Hold it a little closer to the camera since we're
There you
small
go.
right now.
Can you see that?
Yep.
It's right there. Okay. You have your charging port, which on this radio is actually on the back, but on some radios it can be on the bottom or it can be up higher. So you just want to look for those contacts, and that's how you know where your charging port is. You have the antenna, which we'll go over a few more options for that as we go through the training, and when you should and shouldn't extend the antenna and when it would be helpful and when it won't be. Your channel buttons, of course. On this one, it's on the front. On some, it's on the top. As a matter of fact, do you still have one of the county radios over there? If you can get one, that'd be great. So I'm also going to grab one of our county radios to show you guys ones. They're similar to the ones in the lower right-hand corner of the screen right now. But sometimes this stuff is up here on the top along with the volume control. On these radios in particular, we have the opportunity to almost either use channels or actually punch in a frequency. So these are excellent radios. I don't care what people say about Bofangs. All right.
Another important thing with Bofangs is that there is a locking button. You can hold it down and it will keep you on the channel you're on. Not every radio has that, but it's very useful when they do, because sometimes you hit something with your hip that the radio is on and you find yourself 3 repeaters away and talking to nobody. I'm not speaking from experience, no.
You're speaking from experience. Yes, that lock button is very important, and on Bofangs, you will find that. However, on our wonderful county radios, you will not find that. Now, as you can see, the Motorola XTS 2500s that we use that are county radios, they do not have the buttons on the front, which helps when you're leaning against stuff. You're not going to accidentally change channels with this radio because everything is controlled. I don't know if you can see this. Everything's controlled from these knobs that are here on the top.
Tilt it a little
bit more?
A little back.
A little back?
There we go. Now
there we go. We will be bringing him out. To me, that would be quick information. Incident command can record that. We know that he's not passed out in danger of dying. Does that make sense?
All right. He's not experiencing postprandial somnolence.
All
For
right.
those of you who don't know, that's a food coma.
We've got some guy here who's insisting on helping us. What do we do about him? Okay, so
that's actually a really good example of something that can happen, because when we go through a large scale emergency, people will come out of the woodwork to help. And I like the quotes around help. Um, because even if they have no training, they still want to help, fine, because we can always use more hands. But the problem is that we need to do it in a way that's going to be safe for our team, and we need to do it in a way that'll be safe for the new volunteer.
The
So
spontaneous volunteer.
the
as we call them.
spontaneous volunteer, very good. So there is a better way to deal with that. And using the phrasing, we have come across a spontaneous volunteer who would like to help us, is perfectly acceptable. You can ask incident command. If you can't make a call in the field, ask incident command their opinion or their command or their advice on what you need to do. It removes the pressure of you taking responsibility for making that decision, and it raises it to a higher level. Because what we always want to remember with our CERT volunteers is they are only trained to a certain level, disregarding the fact whether they're all first responders volunteering for CERT. Most
When
of
they're
them,
acting as CERT,
when they're
they only
acting
have
as
so much
CERT,
training.
they only have a certain level of training that they're allowed to go up to. So we want to maintain that if Joe Public has volunteered and gotten CERT training, we don't expect him to know what to do with spontaneous volunteers that just walk up to the CERTs in the field, right?
Joe's CERT team can then bring the spontaneous volunteers to, I guess, somewhere in incident command. If we have enough spontaneous volunteers, I imagine that we'll be setting up some sort of area to get them handled.
Incident command can set up a registration post, and they can register to assist while on the scene. Otherwise, we tell them, thank you very much for your offer of assistance. However, this is a dangerous scene, so we'd like you to stay off to the side or not be in the middle of it so that there's no chance that you will be injured. So it's something that, again, you elevate it to someone higher in authority. That way, if they need somebody to argue with, they can come argue with me. And what to say, you should say information that will clearly tell responders what the location looks like, how many victims there are or survivors there are, potentially what kind of dangers they're looking at running into, and anything else that is pertinent to the situation. Okay. Make sure you practice, because we can tell you all day and night what to say, how to say it, but if you don't practice, then you're not going to be able to do it in a regular situation. As a final note, always welcome people to your team who have disabilities or impairments. They can bring a new side to your training and efforts, especially when dealing with communications. One of the best people that I like to talk about on these is we have a friend who is a blind amateur radio operator, and she is absolutely amazing at communications. Here in Camden County, we have a gentleman who has, a disability, and he is absolutely amazing on the radio. So never discount people, and they may be your best source of communications.
Oh, you guys just rave about it. I know, it's wonderful. And for those of you, a quick roundup on that is we got caught one time with the theory that we all watched everything before it went out, and then we actually don't because we don't have time in our schedules. So we all pretend that we have watched the wonderful clips that each other have sent in to Greg. So Greg's great. He knits together all of our insanity on this show really well. And he takes a lot of flack from me, but you know what? You deserve it sometimes.
I have no argument to that.
So then Greg's going to do a segment on the beacons this month. So Greg, do you want to give a little bit of information about that?
Yeah. For those that don't know, out of Ecolima 09, I run 4 beacons right now, and I've got a couple more planned. We've got a beacon on 2 meters, on 432 and 1296. I'm getting ready to do a 6-meter beacon and a 220 beacon in the very near future. Those are located on a tower in central San Antonio, because the last thing I need is beacons at my house when I'm trying to hear things. But anyway, they're a great propagation resource tool. They're also a great tool if you pick local ones to test antennas and antenna gain and things like that. So with that, let's go ahead and roll into Greg and beacons. Well, let's go ahead and go over what are ham radio beacons, why are they so important, and how can you use them? Listening to the continuous tone or call sign of a ham radio beacon can be one of the most useful, if sometimes overlooked, tools in amateur radio. When planning on where to call CQ, monitor for signals and stuff, a beacon is vital. A beacon is a special ham radio station which sends out a signal on a fixed frequency 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They're used to check propagation on the amateur band so that operators can assess whether a frequency band is usable at the moment to the part of the world or the region that they wish to communicate. If there are few ham signals on the frequency you're checking, or none at all, does that mean the band's closed? Not necessarily. It could just mean that, A, nobody's calling CQ on the band, which is open, or that they're all listening for somebody else to call CQ and nobody's talking because nobody is trying to transmit. This is where the ham radio beacons are very useful and vital to the thing. Amateur radio beacons are designed to explore propagation on a specific frequency and band in real time and to discover whether you are likely to make a contact to that part of the region or world at that moment. The receiving station will listen on the spot frequency to see whether the beacon can be heard. This will indicate whether a contact is likely on the ham band between the two regions. With beacons crisscrossing almost the entire frequency spectrum, they are an extremely valuable resource in the study of propagation. On the higher frequencies in the gigahertz bands, distances are much shorter, and the beacon signal can be used to adjust receiving end equipment, antennas, rather than for propagation purposes. Now, I will also tell you, I also use the beacons to confirm frequency accuracy on my radios, my transverters and stuff. And they also have other uses for antenna alignment, which I'll go in a minute. The Hamster Group maintains 3 beacons currently. 144-289, 432-360, and 1296-424. They all transmit N5XO and everything. These beacons are located in Ecolima 09 on the southeast side of San Antonio, about 10 miles from my residence in QTH. I always advise, if you want to set up a beacon, find a remote site to put it up. People that put them up in their QTH create two problems. Number one, they're going to help desense your radios so that the band may be open and you're not hearing it. And also, you typically end up during contests, band openings, and other times shutting them off. And now they're no longer useful for the community at large. All right, the 144-289 beacon has 15 watts RF at the antenna. All of our beacons were designed to maintain 10 to 15 watts at the antenna. So our power is set to overcome the line losses to the antenna. The antenna for the 144-289 is a single K5VH Omni at 110 feet. The 432-360 has 10 watts at the antenna, which is, again, a single K5VH Omni at 105 feet. And the 1296 beacon has 10 watts at the antenna on a stacked Omni at 113 feet. Okay. All of those are run on 1/2-inch hardline, except for the 1296, which is on 7/8 inch hardline. Okay. We're fortunate that the IT and comm room is right outside the base of the tower. So basically my runs are just straight down the tower and 10 feet into the shack and plugged into the beacon. And you can see a couple of the beacons a few minutes ago that I showed you. All right. The beacon's primary purpose is, of course, to track propagation in and out of San Antonio and let others know the band's opening and our direction, and hopefully get their attention and have them start looking our direction, calling CQ and everything. One of the things that we always ask is anytime you're 200 feet, or let's try that one again. Anytime you are 200 miles or more away from us and you're copying the beacons, we'd love to have you drop us a note either on the Hamster Facebook page group, or email me personally at N5XO@N5XO.net. That's a hard email to remember. But also start calling CQ in our direction. Let's make that contact on there. Now, a couple other areas that I use the local beacons for, locally, our beacons do not help us with propagation. Therefore, the people outside there to notice that we're open. But locally, those beacons still play an interesting role. They're great tools for testing antenna designs, rotor alignment, and pattern of the antenna. For example, my stacked 70 element, they're 4-stacked 70 element, 23 centimeter antenna array has amazing gain, and the front to back and side rejection is incredible. So they're fantastic antennas. But man, I have missed a lot of contacts with them. Using the beacon, I was able to determine I was able to pattern out the beam and determine exactly how narrow of a pattern I had. And I learned that if I am off of you 6 degrees plus or 6 degrees minus, I'm not going to hear you, even if you're a local station running power on that. They're just very sharp cutoff and a very narrow pattern. So based on that, what I ended up doing was, and I knew that high gain of an antenna array was going to have that narrow of a pattern. I just didn't expect quite that narrow. So what I ended up doing was I put in a secondary stack set of 36 element beams, just 2 of them, And that's my monitoring pattern. And when I'm hearing a station that I want to work, I can fine tune them with those. And then I switch over to the high gain antennas, and I have no trouble making that contact. Between 200 watts on 1296 and that stacked array, I'm putting some heat your direction. So, you know, so local beacons in your area also play a role. Pattern your antennas, compare antenna designs. One of the things that you'll kind of be surprised on is I've got a bunch of antennas in my backyard, and I've gone through them over the years and tried different antennas that gave me the best performance out of here. It's not always the highest gain antenna or the largest antenna. For example, I've got a 13 element 2-meter Yagi that outperforms all day long a 19 element 2-meter Yagi in my area, because the takeoff angle of the 13 element is much higher. So it gets me out of the low area that my QTH is in. And it also has a little bit better pattern and everything. So I actually can work more stations with the 13 than with the 19. Now, up at my ranch house, the other is true. That 19 outperforms the 13 every day. But it's antenna height on the tower, it's the surrounding obstacles and everything that affect everything. So the beacons really give you a tool locally to kind of work on that. I use 2 sets of beacons when I'm testing antennas. The Roadrunner Microwave Group up out of Austin, Texas, they have a set of beacons for all the bands, and I use those. And I also use my local ones. And I've had a lot of fun. I've patterned a lot, and I've got pretty accurate pattern and coverage areas with my antennas, as well as performance gains and all that. So it's a great resource for that area too. We're working on a system for our beacons here locally to allow for instant reporting. You look up, find the beacons for VHF in your area, and within 500 miles, and monitor them. You'll be making contacts you never suspected, because you're now armed with the band, where the band is opening. I can't talk today. So, you know, look up the beacons for your local area, and there's not a lot of them. So, you know, you're probably going to be more into regional beacons. And then nationally beacons, like in Texas, common band openings are into Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Missouri, occasionally into Ohio, Michigan, New York, down into Mexico. So, you know, I look for beacons in those areas to kind of highlight and keep up. All right, with that, let's go ahead and go back to the show. Thank you.
That was amazing, Greg. I knew nothing about beacons before your segment. Good job.
Yeah, well, you probably still don't know anything about beacons.
Probably not. At least not as of the airing of this show. Now, after the show airs, maybe I can carve out, 5-10 minutes to
We'll
figure
give you
it
the
out.
test next month.
Give me a little mini quiz. Did you actually watch it, Sam? Well, as most of you know, it's really hard to watch yourself. I don't know if you've ever had to do it, but I've done a few interviews in the last week with our local media over the extremely low temperatures we're experiencing right now in Missouri. And I hate watching myself. So I don't make a habit of watching our show. You guys get it genuine, fresh, straight out of the gate from all of us. And I guess Greg, of course, watches himself.
Unrehearsed and
I have to
unedited.
watch it during the rehearsal, or the not the rehearsal,
Right.
Editing.
the editing.
Right.
Yes.
And you know what's fun is when you have to in the early days, before I changed editing software, and I kind of had to manually insert things everywhere. It was sometimes painful because I would play the video back so many times doing the editing. Ruth could recite the entire thing from the other room on that. I would make a comment about something and she would like, well, I've got that down pat. So the new software is great because I can paste and stuff. And I'm having too much assistance from my dog here.
I told you the comic relief this month. We're okay with that. Babies and puppy dogs, I'm telling you, the ratings will go through the roof. Well, we probably have, I believe we have one thing that we do want to talk about before we bring the show to a close. We have a plan for an upcoming segment about the eclipse that is going to be happening in early April. So we're going to go over to Andrea and let her talk a little bit about some of the things that were experimented with at the last eclipse and some things that she might be doing this eclipse. Go ahead, Andrea.
Well, yeah, on April 8th, we've got a total solar eclipse crossing the US. It's going to be passing near a bunch of us in Texas. I don't know if you're actually in totality, Greg. And
yes, we are.
Okay. And it's going to be pass even closer to me. I won't be in totality, but I will get there, put it that way. And for anybody who has not seen a total solar eclipse, and there wasn't any in the US for the longest time, it is something to see. No photos do it justice, especially in totality when you take those glasses off, because you can go bare eyes during totality and see the movement, the flicker. That is something to be seen. So the eclipse, I'll talk a little bit about what I did last eclipse and plans, and hopefully inspire some of y'all to try and get set up. Now's the time to start planning it. It's actually way too late. If you're looking to get a room someplace, you're probably going to pay a premium. Fortunately, though, the prices start dropping fairly significantly when you get outside the area of totality. Though I'll tell you, after the last eclipse, traffic was a nightmare getting from Tennessee back to New Jersey. It was like the whole world was on the road. So it is something to see. If you have not seen it, get prepared. I've got to look at this. Last eclipse, there was some research done in terms of radio propagation during that. And so if I've got some, I'll look into that. And if there's some good results, I'll share those too as well.
That would be interesting to see. Yeah, our plan is, we're actually going to have a mini high school reunion. We've got about 12 of us that used to all be a kind of a hangout clique when we were in high school. And so we decided a perfect get together because 2 people that live out of state are coming into town and stuff. So we're all going to our ranch, which is right in the perfect spot for it. We're gonna have a nice big barbecue, family, high school reunion, and eclipse party at the same time. Kill a lot of birds with one stone.
So I guess the question would be, is there gray line propagation or during a solar eclipse?
That's a good question. And I think the answer is there were some hints of that.
In fact, there's 2 eclipses that are occurring, separated by about a year, aren't they? And they cross directly over, I think, Fredericksburg, Texas, not far from your ranch, Greg.
Yeah. Well, we just had the one here a few months back, and the lighting was bizarre. Ruth and I were just, when it hit the apex there, the lighting was really weird. I've never seen lighting like that. It was a real grayish light that was kind of hard to describe. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens during a full eclipse up there.
Yeah, that was an annular eclipse, correct?
Yeah.
As opposed to what kind of eclipse?
Total eclipse.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
in the annular, you have a little bit of the sun all around the moon or partly around the moon, and you never get to where you have to have proper glasses to look at that, or a projection system or something. When you hit total eclipse, you can actually look, and that's an entirely different experience.
By the way, a little trivia question. Is the dark side of the moon always dark?
No.
That's correct. Just wanted to make sure y'all were aware of that, because when we're seeing what's called a new moon, which is no moon, the other side is completely illuminated, right? That's a yes.
Yes.
That's moon dynamics for 800.
Okay, JD is my new favorite person on this show.
Well, what did I do to earn that? That was easy.
But
I
the
just wanted
far
to give
side of the moon generally stays on the far side of the moon. Just saying.
And we only see one side of the moon because we're tidally locked with the moon, and it stays. It orbits. It's actually the Earth and Moon orbiting each other. That's why it looks like the moon doesn't move, but it actually is rotating. But we're just in this tidal orbital lock that keeps us in this.
It's really
rotating
a spaceship.
It's a spaceship.
Is our teacher, and we're the rowdy kids in the class. Like, okay, people.
Okay, if the flat Earth conversations start up, I'm unplugging. Okay.
So
The flat earthers need to go up north of Greenland, and they will see that the Earth is round.
Spherical, yeah, 100%.
No debate.
So my question would be, because if we were going to go on that thought process, is if the Earth were flat, how would that affect the propagation and everything else, and how all of our radios and antennas and signals actually do work? So that would be my question. If you really wanted to get into a conversation and really, really get them going, is how does all of our stuff work with your theory?
Well, everything would be, I've got the answer. Everything would be horizontally polarized, and it's not. There's vertical. There's also, there's horizontal, vertical, and is the other one circular polarization? Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there you go.
Yes.
Next question.
then you got three-phase polarization.
I told you, he's the
There we
teacher
go.
of my kids.
We're gonna get a bunch of hate mail now.
From the Flat Earth Society, bring it.
To Melissa's point about the moon being a spaceship, I highly recommend the novel Mutineer's Moon.
Uh-oh.
More, please.
So wait a minute, we really did go back to school, because now we have a reading assignment.
Yeah.
Is there a premise of Mutineer's Moon we should know about?
That it's a spaceship.
Hey, you know one thing that's round? The clock. And guess what?
It's over.
All right, guys, time for us to wrap it up for this month. I think this has actually been one of the most entertaining shows to shoot. And of course, I missed months here and there, so
Low threshold.
I love the addition of JD. He is definitely my entertaining. He's going to be tagged the teacher, so that's the feeling I get off of it.
I'm sorry to the
thank you.
couple of hundred listeners out there.
Thank you all for joining us this month. Make sure you tune in over the next couple of months for the continuation of my segment and the upcoming segments on the solar eclipse, as well as whatever else we can pull out. Now, you guys got to remember, we need your ham shack pictures, because otherwise Miss Melissa gets to sit there and be pretty, but she doesn't get to talk. And you know you want to hear Miss Melissa talk. So get those
very true.
Here's one thing I'm going to throw in there. We need you all to like and share the videos, okay? Let us have a sense of accomplishment.
As opposed to dislike and discard.
All right, guys. Again, thank you to our sponsors, the Hamsters Week Signal Group, because without them, we wouldn't have a show. And I'm Sam Henley, KE0LMY. This is Miss Melissa.
KI5ICQ.
Miss Andrea.
Bye-bye. Kilo 2 Echo Zulu.
And Mr. JD, the teacher.
WNDVZ.
And from Greg to close out the show.
N5XO 73, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and like and share.